All right, welcome back to the Daily Facts. And today we're going to read through, we're going to start part one of the lawsuit that Sidney Powell has launched against Georgia. So let's go ahead and get right into it. In the United States District Court, Northern District of Georgia, Atlanta Division. Let's see, Corico, Joaquin Pearson, Vicky Townsend, Consiglio, Gloria K. Goodwin, James Kenneth Carroll, Carolyn Hall Fisher, and Brian J. Van Gundy are the plaintiffs versus Brian Kemp in his official capacity as governor of Georgia, Brad Raffensperger in his official capacity as Secretary of State and chair of the Georgia State Election Board, David J. Worley in his official capacity as a member of the Georgia State Election Board, Rebecca N. Sullivan in her official capacity as a member of the Georgia State Election Board, Matthew Mashburn in his official capacity as a member of the Georgia State Election Board, and ANHLE in her in her official capacity as a member of the Georgia State Election Board. Those are the defendants. Complaint for declaratory emergency and permanent injunction relief. All right. Nature of the action. This civil action brings to light a massive election fraud, multiple violations of Georgia laws, including OCGA 21 2 30D, 21 2 31, 21 2 31.1, and 21 2 522, and multiple constitutional violations, as shown by fact witnesses to specific incidents, multiple expert witnesses, and the sheer mathematical impossibilities found in the Georgia 2020 general election. As a civil action, the plaintiff's burden of proof is a preponderance of the evidence to show, as the Georgia Supreme Court has made clear, that I was not incumbent upon plaintiff to show how the voters would have voted if their absentee ballots had been regular. Plaintiff only had to show that there were enough irregular ballots in place in doubt the result. Meade versus Sheffield, 278, Georgia, 268, 272, 601, SC 2D 99, 102, and that's 2004, citing Howe versus Fears. Okay, we'll just read this footnote. 1, the same pattern of election fraud and voter fraud writ large occurred in all the swing states with only minor variations. See expert reports regarding Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Wisconsin. See William M. Briggs, attached here to as Exhibit 1 report with attachment. Indeed, we believe that in Arizona, at least 35,000 votes were illegally added to Mr. Biden's vote count. All right, the scheme and artifice to defraud was for the purpose of illegally and fraudulently manipulating the vote count to make certain the election of Joe Biden as President of the United States. The fraud was executed by many means, but the most fundamentally troubling, insidious, and egregious is the systematic adaptation of old-fashioned ballot stuffing. It has now been amplified and rendered virtually invisible by computer software created and run by domestic and foreign actors for that very purpose. Mathematical and statistical anomalies rising to the level of impossibilities, as shown by affidavits of multiple witnesses, documentation, and expert testimony evidence this scheme was across the state of Georgia. Especially egregious conduct arose in Forsyth, Spalding, Cherokee, Hall, and Barrow County. The scheme and artifice to defraud affected tens of thousands of votes in Georgia alone and rigged the election in Georgia for Joe Biden. All right, we'll read this footnote too. 50 U.S.C. 20701 requires retention and preservation of records and papers by officers of elections, deposit with custodian penalty for violation, but as will be shown, wide pattern of misconduct with ballots show preservation of election records have not been kept, and Dominion logs are only voluntary with no system-wide preservation system. The massive fraud begins with the election software and hardware from Dominion Voting System Corporation, Dominion, only recently purchased and rushed into use by defendants Governor Brian Kemp, Secretary of State Brian Raffensperger, and the Georgia Board of Elections. Sequoia voting machines were used in 16 states and the District of Columbia in 2006. Smartmatic, which has revenue of about $100 million, focuses on Venezuela and other markets outside the U.S. After selling Sequoia, the Smartmatic's chief executive, Anthony Mr. Muguisa said he hoped Smartmatic would work with Sequoia on projects in the U.S. through though Smartmatic would take an equity stake. Smartmatic and Dominion were found by foreign oligarchs and dictators to ensure computerized ballot harvesting and vote manipulation to whatever level was needed to make certain Venezuelan dictator Hugo Chavez never lost another election. See redacted whistleblower affiant attached as Exhibit 2. Notably, Chavez won every election thereafter. As set forth in the accompanying whistleblower affidavit, the Smartmatic software was designed to manipulate Venezuelan elections in favor of dictator Hugo Chavez. Smartmatic's electoral technology was called Sistema de Gestión Electoral, the electoral management system. Smartmatic was a pioneer in this area of computing systems. Their system provided for transmission of voting data over the internet to a computerized central tabulating center. The voting machines themselves had a digital display fingerprint recognition feature to identify the voter and printed out the voter's ballot. The voter's thumbprint was linked to a computerized record of that voter's identity. Smartmatic created and operated the entire system. A core requirement of the Smartmatic software design was the software's ability to hide its manipulation of votes from an audit. As the whistleblower explains, Chavez was most insistent that Smartmatic design the system in a way that the system could change the software of each voter without being detected. He wanted the software itself to function in such a manner that if the voter were to place their thumbprint or fingerprint on a scanner, then the thumbprint would be tied to a record of the voter's name and identity as having voted, but that voter would not be tracked to the changed vote. He made it clear that the system would have to be set up to not leave any evidence of the changed vote for a specific voter, and that there would be no evidence to show and nothing to contradict that the name or the fingerprint or thumbprint was going with a changed vote. Smartmatic agreed to create such a system and produce the software and hardware that accomplished that result for President Chavez. And you can see ID Exhibit 3, Cardozo attached here too. The design and features of the Dominion software do not permit a simple audit to reveal its misallocation, redistribution, or deletion of votes. First, the system's central accumulator does not include a protected real-time audit log that maintains the date and timestamp of all significant election events. Key components of the system utilize unprotected logs. Essentially, this allows an unauthorized user the opportunity to arbitrarily add, modify, or remove log entries, causing the machine to log election events that do not reflect actual voting tabulations, or more specifically, do not reflect the actual votes or the will of the people. See a Hursty August 2019 declaration attached, Exhibit 4. And attached here to Exhibit 4B, October 2019 declaration and document 9594, so on and so forth. Okay, indeed, under the professional standards within the industry in auditing and forensic analysis, when a log is unprotected and can be altered, it can no longer serve the purpose of an audit log. There is incontrovertible physical evidence that the standards of physical security of the voting machines and the software were breached, and machines were connected to the internet in violation of professional standards and state and federal laws. Moreover, lies and conduct of Fulton County election workers about a delay in the voting at State Farm Arena and the reasons for it evidence the fraud. Specifically, video from the State Farm Arena in Fulton County shows that on November 3rd, after the polls closed, election workers falsely claimed a water leak required the facility to close. All poll workers and challengers were evacuated for several hours at about 10 p.m. However, several election workers remained unsupervised and unchallenged, working at the computers for the voting tabulation machines until 1 a.m. Defendants Kemp and Raffensperger rushed through the purchase of Dominion voting machines and software in 2019 for the 2020 presidential election. A certificate from the Secretary of State was awarded to Dominion. Let's just read this here before we continue. Georgia Governor inks law to replace voting machines. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC News Now, credit, copyright 2019, the Associated Press, June 2019. And it's just an article that talks about replacing the voting machines for the 2020 election. All right, we'll continue. Awarded to Dominion voting machines, but is undated. See attached here to Exhibit 5, copy certification for Dominion voting systems from Secretary of State. Similarly, a test report is signed by Michael Walker as project manager, but is also undated. Okay, test report for Dominion voting systems in Exhibit Exhibit 6. Defendants Kemp and Raffensperger disregard all the concerns that caused Dominion software to be rejected by the Texas Board of Elections in 2018, namely that it was vulnerable to undetected and non-audible manipulation. An industry expert, Dr. Andrew Appel, Princeton professor of computer science and election security expert, has recently observed, with reference to Dominion voting machines, I figured out how to make a slightly different computer program that just before the polls were closed, it switches some votes around from one candidate to another. I wrote that computer program into a memory chip, and now to hack a voting machine, you just need 7 minutes alone with it and a screwdriver. All right, they have an attached Exhibit 7 for that. All right, as explained and demonstrated in the accompanying redacted declaration of a former electronic intelligence analyst under 305th Military Intelligence with experience gathering SAM missile systemic electronic intelligence, the Dominion software was accessed by agents acting on behalf of China and Iran in order to monitor and manipulate elections, including the most recent U.S. general election in 2020. This declaration further includes a copy of the patent records for Dominion Systems, in which Eric Coomer is listed as the first of the investors of Dominion Voting Systems. And there's Exhibit 8, copy of the redacted witness affidavit. Expert Naveed Keshavarz Nia explains that U.S. intelligence services has developed tools to infiltrate foreign voting systems, including Dominion. He states that Dominion software is vulnerable to data manipulation by unauthorized means and permitted election data to be altered in all battleground states. He concludes that hundreds of thousands of votes that were cast for President Trump in the 2020 election were transferred to former Vice President Biden. And there's Exhibit 26 for that. Additionally, incontrovertible evidence Board of Elections records demonstrates that at least 96,600 absentee ballots were requested and counted, but were never recorded as being returned to county election boards by the voter. Thus, at a minimum, 96,600 votes must be disregarded. See Exhibit 9 for that. The Dominion system used in Georgia erodes and undermines the reconciliation of the number of voters and the number of ballots cast, such that these figures are permitted to be reconciled, opening the door to ballot stuffing and fraud. The collapse of reconciliation was seen in Georgia's primary and runoff elections this year, and in the November election, where it was discovered that during the hand audit that 3,300 votes were found on memory sticks that were not uploaded on election night. Plus, in Floyd County, another 2,600 absentee ballots had not been scanned. These found votes reduced Biden's lead over Donald Trump. Georgia's election officials and poll workers exasperated and helped, whether knowingly or unknowingly, the Dominion system carry out massive voter manipulation by refusing to observe statutory safeguards for absentee ballots. Election officials failed to verify signatures and check security envelopes. They barred challengers from observing the count, which also facilitated the fraud. Expert analysis of the actual vote set forth below demonstrates that at least 96,600 votes were illegally counted during the Georgia 2020 general election. All of the evidence and the allegation herein is more than sufficient to place the result of the election in doubt. More evidence arrives by the day, and discovery should be ordered immediately. Georgia law provides for a contest of an election where misconduct, fraud, or irregularity by any primary or election official or officials sufficient to change or place in doubt the result. When illegal votes have been received or legal votes rejected at the polls, sufficient to change or place in doubt the result. For any error in counting the votes or declaring the result of the primary or election, if such error would change the result, or for any other cause which shows that another was the person legally nominated, elected, or eligible to compete in a runoff primary or election. And again, that's Georgia law. OCGA 21-5-552. As further set forth below, all of the above grounds have been satisfied and compel this court to set aside the 2020 general election results, which fraudulently concluded that Mr. Biden defeated President Trump by 12,670 votes. Separately and independently, there are sufficient constitutional grounds to set aside the election results due to the defendant's failure to observe statutory requirements for the processing and counting of absentee ballots, which led to the tabulation of more than 50,000 illegal ballots. The parties. Plaintiff Coriso Joaquin C.J. Pearson is a registered voter who is registered to vote in Columbia County, Georgia. He is a nominee of the Republican Party to be a presidential elector on behalf of the state of Georgia. He has standing to bring this action under Carson versus Simon, 2020 U.S. App Lexus 34184, 8th Circuit, October 29, 2020. He brings this action to set aside and decertify the election results for the office of the President of the United States that was certified by the Georgia Secretary of State on November 20th, 2020. The certified results showed a plurality of 12,670 votes in favor of former Vice President Joe Biden over President Trump. Okay, we're going to stop there and we'll pick up on part 2 next time. Thanks for stopping by the Daily Facts. Do like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment, and we'll talk again soon. Bye.